Hello and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish video. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish video, I'll be talking about my 10 favourite releases from 2021. I know, better late than never, but here it is. Now this is one of my favourite videos to do and one of my least favourite videos to do. It's my favourite because I get to talk about my 10 favourite Big Finish releases of a year, but it's also my least favourite because I've got to try and pick 10 releases, and I have to say, I say it every time, but I have to say this year in particular was very difficult to pick 10 favourite releases because I have to say, I'm going to say it, 2021 was my favourite year of being a Big Finish fan. It was just chef kiss because it was such an interesting year because we were saying goodbye to things. It was wrapping up ready for the relaunch in 2022. We said goodbye to the monthly range, a main staple of the Big Finish catalogue for 20 plus years. We had a lot of curiosity releases like the Fourth Doctor Lost Stories, the Master box with Eric Roberts, but there was a lot of exciting things as well. And it was very much about carving into areas of Big Doctor Who what we haven't seen, like Season 7, Season 11, the First Doctor and Dodo. It was just such an interesting time, and not to mention David Tennant having his own series, Christopher Eccleston on Big Finish, that's still not sunk in. And I think that it was very much for Big Finish for my generation of fans, having the new series Doctors very much being the centre stage of Big Finish of 2021. It was just incredible. And I think that's probably why it's my favourite year of being a Big Finish fan, because it was very much the thing I've wanted Big Finish to do for a long time. The new series Doctors practically be regular in the Big Finish catalogue. It's incredible. So let's talk about my 10 favourite releases. So if you're new around here and you like Big Finish content, then please do consider subscribing, because there's plenty of Big Finish reviews on the channel and upcoming in the near future. We do weekly streams with my friend Luke where we talk about, Big Finish, tier lists and throwback reviews to Big Finish releases. So if you like Big Finish, then this is definitely a good channel to be on. So if you're new around here, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. So without further ado, let's dive into my 10 favourite releases of 2021 Big Finish. At number 10, we have a story we technically already have on our DVD shelves, and it is a bit of a curiosity release. It is Return of the Cybermen, the Fourth Doctor Lost Story. Now this release is a bit of a Marmite one. Some people really love it, some people hate it. Obviously, I love it. I think that this is such an interesting sort of version to see what Revenge of the Cybermen could have been. I don't know if I prefer this to Revenge of the Cybermen, but I think that this portrays the Cybermen a lot better. They're much more like their 1960s counterparts, of them lurking in the shadows, and that is beautiful. I think that's why I like it, because the Cybermen are actually a threat within it. Even when they're not in the story, you get a sense of fear factor with them just looming in the darkness, waiting to strike. But one of the reasons I love it is because of the Season 12 TARDIS crew. We have the whole recast of Sadie Miller taking on her mother's role, Christopher Naylor playing Harry Sullivan. They're just tremendous. Part 1 in particular, when they're all sort of joking around eating food, is wonderful. But I will say that this story does, Sarah in particular does suffer from it being a product of its time, but Sarah's not in it that much. She does sort of get written out because of Space Plague. It does have the similar beats to Revenge of the Cybermen, but it is, the first draft of it. I think Part 3 is the weakest of it when it introduces the sort of aliens, what would be the Vogons, but I think they're just on an asteroid. They're very underdeveloped. But one positive about this story, and I think this is why it's on this list, is because I just had a lot of fun listening to it. And it's a real quick listen. The episodes are really short. They're about 24. I think the shortest episode is 21 minutes, which is part 2, when they're all sort of searching for the Cybermen on Nerva Beacon. Great atmospheric stuff, but I think that this is a real quick listen, and I think that's why I really enjoyed it, because it just flies by, and it's just a real curiosity release. I think it's a great sort of what if Revenge of the Cybermen could have been, and I think that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think that's why it's on this list, because I just had a real good time with it. At number 9, we have a conclusion of a series, and it is Lost Resort and Other Stories, concluding the Mark series of adventures that begun in 2019 in Tartarus with Interstitial, Feast of Fear, Warzone Conversion, Time Apart, Fin Time and Madquake. Now, this set of stories would have been released back in 2020, but because of the pandemic and how closely Lost Resort reflected current world events, they pushed it back, and hence why we got Shadow of the Daleks. So this has sort of been long overdue, and I'm glad that we finally got to the conclusion of it, because I feel like the Mark series of Big Finish stuff I really do recommend, because it's really good Fifth Doctor Big Finish, and it feels like the missing chunk of his era, because it's sort of dealing with the loss of Adric and coming to terms with that, and this is what Lost Resort is. This is the main story, Lost Resort. It's a 4-parter by A.K. Benedict, and it's a wonderful, bleak and quite depressing story with the themes, you know, about plague and sort of grief and all that sort of stuff. And it's the Fifth Doctor getting to see Adric again, and will he be able to say goodbye to Adric? And I think that it's such a rich character story, and this is very much the last piece of the Mark series of adventures. It's a great story because each part lets each Fifth Doctor companion have their own thing to do. Wonderful supporting character, and it's just a story I don't really want to say too much on because it's such a wonderful story for you to experience, and it's just wonderfully rich. I will say the next two stories are the sort of Perils of Nellie Bly and Nightmare of the Daleks are very much sort of an epilogue, because Lost Resort is very much the conclusion of the Mark series of adventures. And Mark is a great character, goes through a lot of stuff, and that all comes to a head in Nightmare of the Daleks. But Perils of Nellie Bly is a fun sort of two-parter, great sort of historical, very much of a line of like Black Orchid and what you see in the 1960s, but with a new series spin with a sort of historical figure in the form of Nellie Bly, who was inspired by, I think, Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, you know, Phileas Fogg's Around the World in 80 Days sort of character, which was a great series with David Tennant in, just to link it back to Doctor Who in a way. And it's a great historical, great little fun romp of an adventure, which I can definitely see being made on TV. Great story for Tegan, the great character interaction with Nellie Bly. But Nightmare of the Daleks is the last story, and it's probably the weakest of the box set. Personally, I think that it's an alright ending for Mark as a character, but it's alright. It's alright. It's okay. But I think the main standout for this set is Lost Resort. Wonderfully bleak story, and just really shows how strong this TARDIS team is, and yeah, real rich in theme and character. And I think that's one thing what I really like about this year's Big Finish, is how rich it is in character development. So at number 9 we have Lost Resort and Other Stories. At number 8 we have something quite masterful. It is Masterful itself, the first Big Finish release of 2021. And what a way to open the year, celebrating 50 years of the Master. And this is John Simm's Big Finish debut, and it's like he never left. I think that this is a wonderful celebration of the Master, a wonderfully witty script by James Goss, full of lovely little Easter eggs and references that will make any fan smile and chuckle. A great sort of wink and nod to Terrance Dicks and the Target novels. It's brilliant. And it's a lovely little continuation from the sort of Series 10 series arc with the Missy and sort of John Simm Master. But yeah, the structure of the story, we see sort of the Masters go off in their pairs, because the Master's actually done it. He's actually won. He's killed the Doctor, and you know, you sort of question, is it the fugitive Doctor, is it Jodie Whittaker, or is it a future Doctor? It's a wonderful how it's sort of left ambiguous, so you can sort of speculate which Doctor the Master finally killed. But I think that this is a real lovely touch, because you even have Delgado's Master feature in it, not properly, but the way he features is so in character, because we have Jo Grant appear, because it was also 50 years of Jo Grant. And she's a wonderful little addition, and her realising that she's surrounded by all these Masters is really chilling stuff. But yeah, the Masters are split off into pairs. So you've got Alex McQueen back, which is wonderful, with the first Master played by, I think, Milo Parker. Wonderful on a sort of colony ship, which is great, sort of having them interact. And Alex McQueen, I've really missed hearing his Master. Then you have Eric Roberts and Jeffrey Beavis, the Crispy Master, or I should say Jeremy. Wonderful, especially because he gets a bit of a love interest, the Crispy Master, which sadly doesn't go to plan. And then you have sort of the War Master, sort of very much being the lead Master within this series, in this set of stories. But yeah, he's sort of the main Master within it. You've sort of got him interacting with John Simm. You have Missy and Sam Kisgart, Mark Gatiss' Master. Wonderful sort of stuff, and even a little cameo of Chameleon, which is wonderful. And I think that it's a real celebration of the Master. I don't want to say too much about it. I will say the ending is a bit confusing, but I think the more times you listen to it, the more it makes sense, and you're like, that's a perfect ending for this story. So yeah, Masterful is number 8, a masterful release, full of wonderful jokes, and just a real one for the fans, I have to say. At number 7 we have Out of Time 2, The Gates of Hell, featuring the 10th and 5th Doctor battling Cybermen in the Paris catacombs. Now this was very much for summer blockbuster audio, the one we're all excited for, and it definitely does deliver. I think that this has more of a story to it compared to Out of Time. Out of Time, the first one with the 4th and 10th Doctor, was very much about oh wow, these are the two iconic Doctors from the classic and new series together, seeing them interact, whereas this is more of a plot driven story, because we've already had that sort of fan interaction with the 5th and 10th Doctor with Time Crash, so it feels like a nice little lead in from Time Crash, because they even reference it, because these two just have a lot of fun together. There's sort of a very interesting dynamic between the 5th and 10th Doctor, because the 5th Doctor, well, the 10th Doctor treats the 5th Doctor very much like a parent figure, which is odd because, you know, the 10th Doctor's the older Doctor. I think the setting of the Paris catacombs is beautiful. It suits for Cybermen very well, sort of that body horror. Sadly, I don't think it's utilised as well as it should do. Mark Gatiss' character is brilliant within it, and he's sort of the main focus of the story, because it all revolves around his character. The Cybermen are great within it, what bits they do feature within it, especially when they sort of occupy Paris, and the 5th and 10th Doctor go to like the Paris Archive to discover what actually happened with this sort of cyber invasion, and they think they found these survivors, but it's just a pile of dead bodies in a tent. And I think that that's real great to see sort of that hope snatched away from, and I think that really plays to sort of the more human nature of both of these Doctors. You have a wonderful sort of companion in the form of Tina, who's a time agent. This story just feels like it belongs in the 2009 specials. It belongs in that time of 2009. It just has that sort of feel-good sort of romp of an adventure, and I think that's the best way to describe it. It's a romp of adventure and just feels very evocative of the Russell T Davies era, and I think that's high praise for David Llewellyn's script Gates of Hell. Number 6, just missing out on the top 5, is Respond to All Calls, the 2nd volume of 9th Doctor Adventures, containing Girl Deconstructed, Frog Motif and Planet at the End. Now this, I think out of the 3 9th Doctor box sets what came out in 2021, this is the best one for me personally. I think that this just feels very evocative of 2005 Doctor Who, especially Girl Deconstructed, as Girl Deconstructed just feels very RTD. It's very much Kids in Sync drama, very sort of family orientated, and just feels like a lost sort of Christmas episode for the 9th Doctor. It's very wholesome, and it's just a real great concept of it. It feels like Fear Her, but done better, but without the drawing. But it's very similar to Fear Her in a way, and that's all I'm going to say. Girl Deconstructed is probably my favourite 9th Doctor adventure. I think that it's just tremendous, and it just wonderful stuff, and it just shows the magic of the 9th Doctor. Then you have Fright Motif, which is a wonderful sort of post-World War II Paris, where you sort of have that sort of great sort of about the music scene in Paris, which is wonderful, and sort of a great sort of character piece for a character I think called Archie, and sort of the monster. This is very much, I would say, Fright Motif is very much the 9th Doctor's Whispers of Terror, because it utilises the audio medium to its advantage with a sound creature, and there's some really wholesome moments within it, with sort of a pillow fort, you know, blanket fort and all that sort of stuff. It feels very wholesome and it fits the era beautifully, but Planet at the End is very much the high concept sci-fi adventure. It breaks everything what the 9th Doctor sort of era did in the TV show, because you have references to the Sontarans where I feel like the references are earned within it. It's not just going, hey, we're going to reference something from previous Doctors. It feels earned, it feels naturally placed within a story, and in this story is very much the 9th Doctor's heaven sent, and that's all I'm going to say. But I would say Girl Deconstructed is probably my favourite of the box set, because it's just such a, it just feels like 2005 Doctor, and I think that that's what we all want. We wanted a slice of that 2005 Doctor Who, and Girl Deconstructed definitely is that. It's such an interesting idea, and such an interesting way. It feels very Moffat-y in the way that it's sort of dealing with a sort of a childhood fear and turning it to a Doctor Who monster and sort of idea, and I think that's why Girl Deconstructed is the standout story of this box set, and I think that this is a tremendous box set. Highly recommend Respond. Number 5, we have a range what has featured on this list ever since it began, and it is the War Master Killing Time, where we see the War Master sort of revisit a few old friends, should you say. Now this is a wonderful set, one of my favourites of the range actually. I think that this is a tremendous box set because we have the War Master playing the long game in the form of this sort of society, what the Time Lords have sent him on this mission, who have been affected by the Time War, that they cannot sort of reproduce. They're sort of in this eternal state that they're trying to develop all that. But you have the sort of War Master going up against the politics of this planet, and trying to gain control of the society and become the head of the society. And he goes up against this character called Calantha, who is very much a match for the War Master, and they have these very wonderful character interactions over dinner, and they're wonderfully written by James Goss. I think James Goss does a wonderful job characterising both of these, and the War Master loses it, and obviously he's playing the long game because this is his plan, and I think it's very interesting to see how the War Master takes it and what steps he will do to achieve victory. And then we have The Quiet Night by Lou Morgan, which is the Joe Jones story, and my god, this is one of the most heartbreaking audios. It's the way the War Master teases Joe and just the way it plays out. It's a story where it naturally fights you. It's a story where you have to constantly be listening to it. It's a story what doesn't want you to sort of settle in. It wants you to constantly be unnerved. It's a story what just pushes you away, but it's an audio what fights you. And I think that's the best way to describe it because of the event what goes on it. It's very psychological. It's a psychological thriller and horror really. Orphan features Nyssa. This is very much Nyssa sort of finding a cure for the society, and I think that it's really good. It is really good, especially when Nyssa realises that's the Master. Is beautiful because the beauty of the War Master is that you think, oh, he's just a nice, sweet, doddery old man, you know, he's this grandfather figure, but he just switches and becomes one of the most evilest masters out there, and it's brilliant. And again, very, very sort of horrible stuff happens. Then we have Unfinished Business, where we see the War Master wreak his revenge on Calantha, and yeah, it's a real great sort of long game box set. And I really did enjoy it, and I think that's why Killing Time is a real great release for the War Master range. It's just tremendous. I've done a review on it, so you can check out my full thoughts on the box set. And number 4, we have a series of adventures. I know I should only be picking one release of it, but you know, it's my list, my rules, I guess. So at number 4, we have Dalek Universe. Now this was one of the standout releases of the year for many people. It got a load of people hyped up for, and for me, this is a very special sort of set of releases because I'd wanted Big Finish to do their own sort of, give the 10th Doctor his own Dark Eye style box set, and boy, we got it with Dalek Universe. Now I will say that Dalek Universe is greater than the sum of its parts. You know, the stories themselves are fine, they're great, but I think when you all put it together and you piece the jigsaw together, it becomes a real great triumph, and it shows that Big Finish can do interlock stories brilliantly, because it can do standalone stories, but it focuses on the characters within it, and then it all leads back to the grand finale in Dalek Universe. That's Dalek Universe 1. In Dalek Universe 3. I mean, look at that cover. It's tremendous. So we see the 10th Doctor pair up with Anya Kingdom from the 4th Doctor Series 8 adventures. You don't need to know anything about it because you know, it's very much sort of made for new listeners, I would say. But I think if you have listened to the 4th Doctor Series 8, then you have a greater context of understanding why the 10th Doctor is a little bit shady towards Anya Kingdom. Then you have Mark 7, who's a character from, I think, the comics and the Dalek Annuals, so it's great to see sort of a reimagining and retweak of his character within this series. But yeah, the stories themselves, Buying Time and The Wrong Woman, are tremendous. The cliffhangers for Dalek Universe, a load of people will say it, the twists and turns you go on it is brilliant. And it's just tremendous. I think that David Tennant, this is like he never left. It feels like a lost, missing series of 10th Doctor adventures. It is just beautifully done. The House of Kingdom is a wonderful character piece for Anya Kingdom. Then you have the Cycle of Destruction, which I think is one of the weaker ones. I would say the weakest stories from Dalek Universe is probably Cycle of Destruction and The First Son. The Trojan Dalek is a particular highlight of the actual box set, and I will say that despite it being called Dalek Universe, the Daleks barely feature in it. It's more of a celebration of Terry Nation. It's more Terry Nation's universe. You know, it very much riffs off sort of Terry Nation's Doctor Who. So if you like that sort of stuff, then you're going to have a field day with Dalek Universe. But going back to the box set, The Lost is a great character piece for, I would say, Mark. I think that's a real great. I think Trojan Dalek and The Lost are, you know, great character pieces for Mark and the 10th Doctor. But I think that The First Son, like I say, is the weakest. But then you have the Dalek Defense and the Triumph of Davros, which are two epic stories where everything comes full circle. And I don't want to spoil it. It's just a tremendous series, and the vibes are immaculate. And I don't want to say too much on it. I would like to do a video dedicated reviewing all of Dalek Universe because It deserves it, it's tremendous, and is definitely one of the big releases of that year, and deserves all the praise it gets because it is just phenomenal. 3, we had a new range launch at Big Finish, which is the audio novels. We did have a prototype release in the limited edition Masterful set, which is Terror of the Master. Again, fantastic story. But I'm talking about Scourge of the Cybermen, a season 11 story with the 3rd Doctor and Sarah Jane, featuring the Cybermen on a sea base. It's very, very cool, very claustrophobic, and it's a story where the stakes just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you really do wonder, is the 3rd Doctor and Sarah Jane going to make it out alive? And you know they're going to make it out alive because you've seen Planet with Spiders, you've seen all the Sarah Jane and 3rd Doctor adventures, but this story really questions, damn, are they actually going to make it? And I'm gonna say a bold statement now. I think Scourge of the Cybermen is probably my favourite Cyberman story of all time in any Doctor Who media, whether that be audio, books, TV. Scourge of the Cybermen for me is just perfect. The way they're revealed within the story, it feels earned, and when they appear, they have such a terror. It really delves into that sort of psychological horror of the Cybermen, whether that be body horror or just that sense of them lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce and strike, is tremendous. This is a 7-hour long adventure. It's a 6-parter. So I know that this story might not be for everyone, but I think John Coleshaw really brings this story to life. His 3rd Doctor is superb. Even his Sarah Jane's great. He gets the intonation of Elizabeth Slade and the way she speaks. It is just brilliant. The way he's just perfect for the audiobook reading, because he gives each character their own distinct voice, so you don't feel lost within it. But yeah, it's a story. It's a wonderful base under siege story, and what's not to love? Simon Gurrier really knows how to work and craft these stories because he is very much the king at writing 1960s style stories. It's very much a 1960s style story, but with the 3rd Doctor. And I love how this story starts in not a conventional way where we have the 3rd Doctor and Sarah arrive on this base, but it's very much, they're already established in this sort of sea-based colony. And I think that for the most part, the story follows, we follow Sarah throughout it. We're very much seeing the story through her eyes, her investigating all these weird goings on. And there's this wonderful line with this cafe shop owner where, he's wondering about people's future. And there's a bit where he's like, they will have no future. And it's just great because there's this wonderful doom-ridden story. And as the story gets more, the Cybermen get more and more involved, the story becomes more claustrophobic, and the story just closes in and becomes even more tense and thrilling. And it's a story what you think, it's 7 hours, it's not going to be, it might be a bit of a slog, but my goodness, it just sells it. The Cybermen are superb. The 3rd Doctor gets some wonderful action moments, with the Cybermen attacking this mini sub and him just trying to get him off. It's just tremendous as the sub's about to sink. Honestly, it's action-packed and it's just tense and thrilling. Scourge of the Cybermen, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderfully enhanced audiobook, and yeah, best Cyberman story. I think that just sells it. I've done a review on it. Check out my review on Scourge of the Cybermen because it is just worth your time. At number 2, we have a main range release, which is The Blazing Hour, featuring the 5th Doctor and Turlough. Now, this was the penultimate main range story, and my goodness, this is a wonderfully bleak and dark stories. I mean, I'm quite a happy person, but my goodness, I seem to like the bleak and depressing stories because I think with a Doctor like the 5th Doctor, the more bleak of a situation is, the more he shined, because he's that very sort of Doctor what doesn't act on impulse. He waits for things to happen, and then he's pushed into action, which is great. This is very much the 5th Doctor and companion in Chernobyl. It's very much that sort of doom-ridden thing that the planet's about to blow up because of this sort of high sci-fi sort of concept of this sort of using the vortex and using time to power whole cities and universes and planets. It's a real great idea and concept, and it's just a real great sort of social commentary and political commentary on like governments. You have a wonderfully sort of despising character in the form of Violet Hardacre, how she sort of manipulates the 5th Doctor's sort of strong emotional sort of attachment to Turlough, in the sense that he doesn't want to lose another friend. He wants to put things right. It's just very in keeping of season 21 sort of 5th Doctor's character. I've done a full review on it. I think that this is just a wonderful way of sort of characterising it. I think especially when this came out, it very much reflected sort of government sort of things, how they deal with certain situations. And yeah, it's just a real sort of doom-ridden story and yeah, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best Fifth Doctor audios out there. It's just real great stuff. Yeah, like I say, the best way to describe it, Fifth Doctor in Chernobyl. It's that sort of disaster movie feel to it, and I think it really works incredibly well. And I think that is why The Blazing Hour is at number 2. At number 1, we have a release what I don't think will come to a surprise to anyone who's followed the channel with my Big Finish content. It is the Third Doctor Adventures Volume 7. Now this is what I mean about Big Finish carving into areas of Doctor Who they haven't explored. We have the Season 7 and Season 11 style story. Granted, we had the Annihilators this year, but this was the first to kickstart that trend really. And my goodness, I feel like this is well earned, because this box set is entirely recast, and I think that the range had definitely earned it. This is the 7th box set within the range, so it's allowed to explore and go into different avenues, and it opens up the whole of the Third Doctor era now to have stories from. So we have the Unzal incursion, which is my favourite of the 2 stories. It's the Season 7 style story, full of action, espionage. It's a great story for Liz because it starts to think, is Liz ready to leave UNIT because she wants to have the next scientific frontier and explore? And that as she's sort of the centre of the story, because she's developed this sort of network called the Hotspur network, and that's trying to be infiltrated. You know, we have UNIT being infiltrated with spies. It's wonderful. You get great action moments with, you know, Bessie and car chase sequences. What you don't think would work on audio, but it works. It feels very Inferno Part 3 style, which is, you know, one of my favourite episodes of Doctor Who of all time because of that Bessie car chase. You have the TARDIS sort of console being utilised to its advantage. It's a real great dynamic between the Brigadier, the Doctor and Liz. You have the return of the Hercules from the invasion. It's just great. The Unzal are a very fitting monster for Season 7, and the way sort of it's being shifted and manipulated by another character, what makes me think that this might be the sort of spearhead from space to Terror of the Autons. I feel like we might get a sequel to the Unzal incursion, because it's definitely, you know, there's a nice little, you know, post-credit scene after, which I definitely say stick around for, because it's a nice little surprising listen when you realise who will actually behind these events. But yeah, Part 1 is free on Big Finish's website, so you can check out Part 1 if you want. It's got the Ambassador of Death sting, so it just you know, the Third Doctor Adventures is probably where Big Finish goes all out to make it sound like the era it comes from, and this is a prime example. The Gulf is a wonderfully, again, quite a bleak story, you know, with this sort of, it's sort of the Third Doctor Waters of Mars, I would say. It has that sort of feel to it. The actual Gulf is such an interesting concept. Sarah Jane, Sadie Miller does a wonderful job within it. You know, there's more of a playful nature to Sarah within it, what you don't get in Return of the Cybermen. The supporting characters are great. The whole sort of build-up and atmosphere is superb. That sort of claustrophobic, sort of doom-ridden atmosphere within it, because, you know, they even reference how sort of depressing this place is, how the Gulf and the ocean and the water can affect you. It is just brilliant. We have a wonderful reference to I Am the Doctor, and even a reference to Stolen Earth and Journey's End, which is a nice little surprise. But yeah, I've done a full review on the Third Doctor Adventures Volume 7, so you can check out my full thoughts on this, and I think that this is definitely the standout in the Third Doctor range. Is just chef kiss. I think it is a phenomenal release, and definitely feels well earned to have a box set just dedicated to the recast, because you see how well they've done. You know, Daisy Ashford as Liz Shaw as well, I've got to mention, does a superb job. She's really found her mother's voice, and it's just spooky. It's really spooky how well these people have got to know these characters and sound pretty much identical. I think that this is a real triumph to how far the Big Finish recast can go, and how far Big Finish have come since launching the Third Doctor Adventures back in 2015. So that concludes my top 10 Big Finish releases for 2021. Please let me know your favourite releases from the year. Be very interested to know how similar our lists are. And if you've enjoyed this video, then please do like it, because it really does help the channel out. And if you're new around here, please do consider hitting that subscribe button, because hey, there's plenty of Big Finish content upcoming and on the channel. So if you like Big Finish, please do hit that subscribe button if you're new. So yes, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see you next time for whatever that video will be, but I will see you then, and take care, and bye for now. Goodbye.